These new cinema lenses have autofocus and manual focus gears built into them. Now you can get the best of both worlds in one lens body. These are the new Samyang V-AF lenses, and we're gonna take a closer look at the 24, 35, and 75 millimeter lenses here. They also have plans to release a 20, 45, and 100 millimeter lenses in the lineup to make a full set of 6 lenses. The lenses currently only come in Sony E mount, so they work with my Sony FX3, and they cover both full frame and APS-C sensors. Let's start by looking at the build quality. Now, every lens in the set is the exact same size and weight, which alone is incredible because honestly, I've worked with a lot of different cinema lens kits in the past, and they can be the same size, but almost always are they different weights. I'm not sure how they pulled it off, but it's really impressive. The obvious advantage of having them all the same weight is that when you do a lens swap on your gimbal or on a drone, you don't have to rebalance anything. The lenses also have a unified form factor, meaning that the focus aperture ring is in the same place on all the lenses. Again, this makes lens swaps really easy and simple because you don't have to move your follow focus around at all to get everything lined back up. The ring serves 2 purposes. It can either be used to pull focus manually, or you can flip the M1, M2 switch on the side here, and it will allow you to quickly change the aperture of the lens. Now, this is different from most fully manual focus lenses like this Rokinon Cine DS that has a separate ring for pulling focus and another one for aperture control. That's typically what you would see. Now, you can use the Samyang lens station plugged into your computer to customize what the M1 and M2 switch does. You just want to mount it on this little lens station here and then plug it into your computer with USB. Now, the Samyang lens station doesn't come with the lenses, but you can buy it on their website separately. The lens bodies are made of a very solid feeling plastic, but something that's interesting is this front accessory mount, and it's made of a solid metal. So this is a really unique design that I've never seen before. The mount has a filter thread diameter of 58 millimeters, so you can thread on those ND filters if you want to. But the metal mount has many more capabilities than just that. You can actually add their manual focus adapter. Now, I know this might sound confusing because yes, you can manually focus with this lens without this, but it's not quite the same. So let me explain. When you're turning the focus ring on the lens, it'll spin infinitely. There are no hard stops like you would experience on a fully manual lens. Something like this Rokinon Cine DS lens has hard stops built in, and you can actually hear them when I get there. Whereas with this, you can just spin it and spin it and spin it in any direction. There are no hard stops. The lenses operate a lot more like a Sony autofocus lens, and that's because these lenses are actually focused by wire. The lens elements won't change focus by spinning the ring unless it's actually mounted onto the camera. Now, if you're like me and you really enjoy manual focusing and that feel of the hard stops and all the control that that brings, then that's where the manual focus adapter really comes into play. Now, this adapter is sold separately, but I think it's worth it for all the features that it adds. So it mounts directly on the metal bayonet here. You just line up the little pin connectors on the manual adapter and on the front of the lens. And then you lock it into place by spinning this ring. Now you're actually gonna get those hard stops. So listen in as I spin it, I'll hold it close to the mic, you'll hear it actually stop. So let me go ahead and mount this on the front of the 35 millimeter lens here on my camera and just lock it into place. And it's really nice because it's really easy to swap this manual focus adapter between the different lenses. You don't need to buy one for every single lens. That would just be ridiculous and redundant. So now that I have that on, I'm going to attach my manual follow focus, and this one is from Tilta. So I'm just gonna get this on. This is their little mini follow focus, and you can see I'm hitting those hard stops. Now, I do want to show you that you don't actually have to use the manual focus adapter, and I'm going to move my Tilta follow focus back here. So you can see how you can also use the follow focus just on the body of the lens. The only difference is that you're not getting those hard stops. Let's put on the electronic follow focus motor, also from Tilta, and this is the Nucleus Nano. So I'm gonna mount this motor on, and then I'm gonna put the focus grip on the side. I've shown this on the channel a lot, but I absolutely love this focus grip. All right, there we go. So I want to show you the difference between using it directly on the lens and not on the lens. What's interesting is the focus grip is actually adding its own hard stops, but they're not lining up directly with where the lens should be. So what's happening is I'm getting my near focus, and then when I go to infinity, it's not actually focusing to infinity. And that's because the motor isn't calibrated to the lens. Now you can do a manual calibration with this lens, but I find that it doesn't work the best when you're using focus by wire. So I want to show you how this actually works with the manual focus adapter now. So let's add this back on. And then what I'm going to do is actually do the calibration. So I'll hold the cal button on the back of the focus grip here. It's hit the first hard stop. Now it's going to go to infinity on the lens and hit that other hard stop. There we go. Now it's fully calibrated. So as I pull this around, it's actually stopping in all of the correct spots. And something else you could do now that you're controlling the manual focus with this ring, you could actually still control your aperture with the second ring here. So you could put another follow focus motor on here if you wanted to, or you can just pull it manually. Now, another advantage of the manual focus adapter is that it actually works as a lens hood. So it's gonna protect you from any of those unwanted lens flares, because the lenses themselves don't come with any sort of lens hoods that mount on them. So this works great for accomplishing that. Now, another thing is the actual outside diameter of the manual focus adapter is a standard 95 millimeters, which means that you can mount your clamp on matte boxes like this one that I'm using from Polar Pro. This is the base camp. I've shown it 100 times on the channel and I still love it because it has those built-in ND filters and it works so well. Now, something that I've ran into, just a little problem, is that the base camp doesn't want to mount to the front because it's actually interfering with the motor itself. It's hitting right into it. That's just because of the placement of the motor. So you could swap things around a little bit. If you're running the exact same setup as me, which is the Sony FX3 with the top 15 millimeter rod, it's actually hitting right into it. Instead, what you could do is actually mount this on 15 millimeter rods from the bottom of the lens, and then it will not hit into the base camp or your clamp on matte box at all. So let me just show you how this works really quickly. Clamp the matte box onto it. And boom, there we go, it's added. Let me open up the flag here and check that out. Just like that, on these Samyang V-AF lenses, you have a clamp on matte box and it just looks so good. Let me show you another really cool feature of this adapter and the lens that I've never seen before. So on the bottom here, you can actually see a little tally light. So when I press record, it's gonna turn red. So if you do a lot of filming of yourself, like I do, I can actually see that it's recording and I don't have to worry if the camera is rolling. Now on the Sony FX3, there is a little tally light up on the top here as well, but it can be a little bit hard to see. There are a lot of cameras that don't have front tally lights. So if you have a camera that doesn't have that tally light, you're gonna find this to come in really handy. I'll show you how it's also built into the top of the lens here. So you can see it there. Once I hit record, it turns red. So you don't even need the adapter to take advantage of these tally lights. That's just a really cool feature and I love that. There's also one on the side of the lens. Good on you, Samyang, for coming up with something kind of unique and cool that I haven't seen on really any lenses that I've used before. Now, something to be aware of when you buy the manual focus adapter, you will need to make sure that each of your lenses have the most up-to-date firmware to work with it. So you are going to, again, need the Samyang lens station to actually do any firmware updates, because when I first got the lenses, it wasn't working, and then I spoke with them and found out that I just needed to do a quick firmware update, and then everything started working perfectly. All right, I've spent a lot of time talking about the focus adapter, and that's just because it's really unique and a cool piece of tech, but let's get back to the actual lens bodies themselves. On the side of each lens, there's a focus hold button. And if you press it, it will lock focus on whatever the lens focused on in your autofocus mode. You can also customize what the button actually does. So if you want to change it to do something else, you can do that with the Samyang lens station. We've talked a lot about the lens build and functionality. Now let's see how they actually perform. So we're going to take a look at some basic autofocus tests that I did here in the studio. Here's the test with the 24mm lens. Now here's the 35mm lens. And finally, here's the 75mm lens. You can see how well the lenses actually do at tracking my face and keeping the subject in focus. And the focus transition is very smooth between the subject and the background when I pop in and out of frame. It's not really abrupt or robotic feeling. It's not super electronic. It actually has a really nice roll-off and smooth rack focus, and I really like that. In my opinion, the lens's autofocus performs almost just as well as Sony native glass. So I was really impressed with just how fast and accurate each of them actually were. Okay, now that we've seen how well they perform technically, let's actually watch some real world footage that I shot with these lenses on a trip to California. Hopefully you enjoyed that quick B-roll. I know it wasn't a super technical test, but I always enjoy seeing how lenses perform in different lighting conditions and out in the real world, instead of looking at boring charts or static objects in a studio. Now let's take a look at how these lenses flare. And this was a really interesting test for me because I really just could not get these lenses to flare up much at all. I pointed my LED spotlight directly at the lens and moved it all around, trying to get each of them to really flare up, but they just wouldn't. I even pointed them directly at the sun, and this was really impressive to me because some of my previous Rokinon Cine DS lenses would just flare up so easily, and I'd always have to use a matte box to prevent that from happening. They must have put some really great lens coatings on these because they handle it really well. The lenses have a standardized color balance, so when you're switching between the different focal lengths in the lineup, you should have a really harmonized color and contrast without drastic shift as you're switching between them. So it's gonna make color grading and doing your editing so much easier. The lenses are very sharp and they support up to 8K resolution. Each of the lenses have a wide open aperture of t1.9, which I absolutely love because they do so well in low light situations. They let in plenty of light, and of course you also get that very shallow depth of field. You can get some really gorgeous bokeh. Each lens has a different minimum focus distance, and naturally the wider angle lenses like the 24mm can get much more close up to 0.62 feet, whereas with the 75mm you can only get as close as 2.26 feet, so it's significantly further away. Let's talk about pricing now. Each lens in the lineup is $649, except the 24mm, which goes for $699 in US. And in my opinion, this is a really great price because these lenses have great autofocus ability and manual focusing. And the lenses are a great set to start investing in and building out over time. Now, the manual focus adapter is $399, and I do think that's a little bit steep, but honestly, it's worth it if you do a lot of manual focusing and you want the added hard stops and the ability to clamp a matte box on easily. Let's talk about a few downsides of these lenses, because no lens is perfect, and I did find that changing the aperture versus focus on these was a little bit confusing at first because it does only have one ring. But once I figured out what the M1 versus M2 switch does, it really wasn't a big deal. Finally, I do think it's a bit of a bummer that you have to buy the Samyang lens station separately to do any firmware updates or customizations to the lens. I wish that they would just include this with the purchase of a lens or the manual focus adapter, because there's a good chance you're gonna need it, and it's about $40. Overall, I'm really impressed with these lenses. So if you're in the market for a new set of manual cinema lenses, but you also want the advantage of autofocus lenses for filming yourself or filming on a gimbal, then these are definitely something worth looking at. So check out the link in the description below. I want to say a special thanks to Samyang for sending these out for review. They didn't pay me to say any of this. All right, I'll see you in the next video.